Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Flock Knowledge series. We're going to be showcasing thought leaders in the industry, various topics that we have lined up throughout the next few months. Hopefully, you find a lot of value in these. And if you'd like to get in contact with us, please feel free to reach out. We'll be including the links and the details in the description below. My name is Mike Lysko, CEO and founder of Flock Eventing Platform. Wow, what a whirlwind the past 18 months have been. I don't think I need to go on too long for it, but yeah, it's really changed the face of many industries, including our industry. The events and business events industry has really had to pivot and adapt to certain things, some for good and some for not so good. But we've seen as businesses and event attendees recognize the benefits of virtual events. People are expecting a polished and professional experience that allows attendees to participate, make connections, and shape the conversations, even if they aren't physically at the event. At the same time, people want in-person events. They want to connect, and they also want to include an engaging virtual option to increase the overall reach. We've seen the benefits of virtual events and hybrid events where you can extend the reach of your audience, expanding your awareness, expanding registrations, online traffic, and while preserving the advantages of a physical event. From a recent report that I read, in fact, 65% of planners surveyed said they want to hold more hybrid events as a result of the pandemic. And in addition to this, recent market conditions changing the event landscape, and as the pandemic social distance measures have eased, innovative digital event planners and platforms are fueling the explosive growth in the online event space. Given these circumstances, Allied Market Research predicts that the market for corporate digital events will increase by approximately 120% in the next 5 years. So that's 120% in the next 5 years. That equates in terms of dollars to a spend of about over $722 million in the next 5 years in the corporate digital event space. And why? What are the key drivers for this in the virtual event space? Is a wider audience reach, cost savings, high return on investments, and better access to speakers, and easier planning, and more affordable budgets. So I'm joined by a stalwart in the events industry. His name is Neil Nagooro. He's the MD for Next Level Consulting, and a recent consultant to Flock. So really enjoy working with Neil. He has over 20 years experience in the public and private sector, managing Africa's Travel Indaba and Meetings Africa, some of the largest projects which have contributed to the business events industry. He's also been previously the sales and GM at Sandton Convention Center, as well as the chairman for EXA and currently the vice chair for Saki. Neil, great to have you here.
Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate you taking the time to have me on this webinar, and looking forward to contributing some insights into where we've come from over the last 18 months and just some trends that we're seeing going into the future. Thank you.
Neil, thank you. And how have you personally seen the events industry change? Before we get into the webinar questions that we have, what have you seen highlight for you? What have been some of the highlights that have stood out?
Well, I think firstly, with the onset of COVID, I think it was quite difficult to understand how long and where we're going to go. Some companies have been completely decimated. Some companies realize they've got to pivot and change strategy, and some companies just took a little longer to get there. But so far, the ones that have been able to adapt into more virtual and hybrid, and understanding that the face of events has changed from being completely live, those are the ones that seem to getting some progress. It's a sad reality, but there's a lot of companies that have completely closed down. There's a lot of people in our industry have lost jobs. But the positive part of it is that we've finally seen some light at the end of the tunnel going into the future. So yeah, so complete change of how the events industry works in South Africa. We were predominantly a live events industry with mass numbers. We now going into virtual spaces, we're going into hybrid spaces. So completely changed the face of how we've been doing events.
Completely. And I think it's also given people that sense of the world is changing, and how do you adapt to ever-changing things, and how you can utilize technology. Imagine this had happened 20 years ago, when there wasn't a stable internet, or there wasn't the infrastructure that we currently have to be able to have an online Zoom conference, or just be able to connect even with businesses outside of the events industry, connecting with teams. So technology, I think, has really helped. To your point around the loss of jobs, it is really hectic. I think those that were agile enough, and I think through that, it's a transition that happens where you're able to see what's the next step in that career, essentially. But how have you seen businesses in the past 18 months responding to events?
So a couple of things, Mike. I think firstly, there was a wait and see attitude. I think everybody thought firstly, this is going to be a 3-week or a 2-month thing. And then, as it got into May and June, people realized that it's probably going to be around for a long time. There's a lot of PCO and event managers that thought, okay, let's just wait it out and it'll kind of blow over, and didn't really take on anything from a virtual or online perspective. And they just waited it out. And a lot of them from the industry I'm seeing are still waiting it out, which is not ideal. And then there are companies, for example, like Flock, who understood that, you're coming from a digital perspective and we have to have solutions, even if it was for an interim perspective. And the development of technology has been phenomenal. If you look at every product that we're using at the moment, from Remote to Hopin to Ameet, and there's so many other platforms that are out there. Just the interactivity, the engagement it's creating is really bringing a different experience online. Initially, I think everybody went through learnings of connectivity issues. You and I were having these connectivity issues a few minutes ago as well. But everybody, we're all learning, we're all trying to figure these things out and get to a point where we can have a proper online event and something that's engaging. So, and secondly, I've seen some companies thrive. Some companies did the early adoption of systems online. They've completely married physical events online and made it work. And now, they're benefiting from it. So yeah, that's basically what we've seen over the last few months, Mike.
Yeah, I think it's to your point around having the flexibility to change your business model and having to learn really quickly. I think that really helped set those early adopters. And Neil, how have companies, in your opinion, been agile during this period?
I think there was the first instance of learning. I think the big thing for me has been companies that have invested in not only technology, but the project manager behind it, the understanding behind it, and getting to know the product that they're offering in detail. That agility came in because they were easy to take that product and adapt it to any type of scenario from a live events perspective. And they were able to deliver a phenomenal online experience. And I think the important thing for me was that the agility comes in how quick you can respond. Because a lot of people waited it out and said, okay, let's wait for a few more months. Let's see if this goes ahead. Is this going to stop? And they, didn't adapt quickly. The agility came in for a lot of the companies that said, we know this is going to become an online event. They've looked at trends internationally, and they've brought those products that were, whether India-based or American-based, and they've made it work locally. But they did it quite quick, but they were able to understand that they needed to know the detailing behind it. Because when you're doing a live event, like the webinar we're doing, when you start, when you don't understand the product and things start falling apart, you need the ability to fix that quickly. So as quick as you can, make it look seamless and get on with the event. So that agility comes in complete understanding of what you're selling.
Of course, and to your point around having to troubleshoot really quickly, having that team to be able to assist you, I think is really important. Event planners, I was reading, I think it's the third most stressful jobs in the world. So, a lot of respect goes out to event planners that have to manage multiple things. So, Neil, in terms of some of the trends that you've seen that have worked overseas and currently where we're at now with restrictions easing, do you see a big shift to physical events? Or do you see online still being part of the marketing and event strategy mix for companies?
Well, I've had the opportunity to work with and speak to quite a lot of the event planners and PCOs, and we and everybody understands this right now. Everything is becoming hybrid. I think you're getting a portion of any audience that's willing and has been looking to just get out of their houses and get to an event. But you also have a portion of your audience who do not want to leave home. And that's just the reality of what it is. So from a trend perspective, it's absolutely about being hybrid right now. From a venue side, speaking to a few venues, you see a lot of people doing smaller meetings, so 15, 20 people. The norm has been around 30 to 50 people that do want to have events. But the biggest trend right now is obviously hybrid. There's a lot of studios that are being set up. And I do a little bit of work with the focus rooms as well. And there's studios there that are set up that have full streaming capabilities. And there's a lot of these venues that are coming up. But because you have to cater for an online audience and you have to cater for a live audience, you cannot be specific and saying we're only going to do a live, we're only going to do an online event. It has to be a hybrid mix. And I think that's going to become the norm, even going into the next 2 to 3 years, where I think also the trend event organizers are going to find is that it's obviously cost effective to have an international speaker log in, do a full-on presentation via any platform, then bringing them in, flying them in, spending 200,000 Rand on flights and accommodation. So those are the things that you're going to have hybrid for a very long time. I think it'll phase out at some point, but I think in the next 2 to 3 years, we're definitely going to have it. I think a lot of countries are still playing around with, we're just lucky we've got off the red list with the UK. Travel to the States has also opened up for us as well. But you see that a lot of it's coming to the point of wait and see. There's so many talks of what's going to happen with COVID in the next few months, and then we have to, pivot back. But hybrid does offer a fantastic solution.
And on that point then, how do you see let's talk about, say, South Africa and the current situation in South Africa with the event industry. Do you see support from government and big business? What in your opinion do the next 6 months to a year look like in terms of the events industry? Do you think we're going to go back to where we were in terms of the event spend, or maybe give us some of your insights that you feel are going to take place in the next few months?
Cool. I think on the outset, Mike, I'm going to tell you up front, it is so difficult to be able to fix on anything. I think when it comes to the one thing that we've all just have become familiar with is that it's ever changing, you know, from month to month, from week to week. But I think the commonality we're seeing is that government has understood we have to open up business. We have to open up the economy. We have to invest in making sure that meetings and events can start operating again. And I think that's the first part of it. The second part, there's a lot of reputational risk that big corporates are or will face if they have mass meetings, if they have big corporate events or big year events, if there's an outbreak of any sort. And like we've seen last year towards the end of the year with a couple of festivals that happened. But the thing for us is that we need corporates to start taking the next step of investing in our industry. We need corporates to start having those hybrid events. We need corporates to start investing in. There is a trend that it's coming back. If all things stay equal the way it is now with the 750 packs, the 2000 outside, going into, we know our industry goes through a bit of a shutdown in December and January, but hopefully early next year. I'm hoping that there's a lot more confidence that bigger corporates will invest back into our industry. It is very slow at the moment, and I do understand it's a reputational risk issue from them. It's also protecting their people and protecting the employees. But we need to start seeing some type of investment, bigger investment into our industry. So I would say the next 6 to 12 months, I'd see more a sort of a wait and see, given that it's open up a bit, there's a lot happening. People want to have stuff. There's a lot of staff that want to get back to work. A lot of staff want to engage with each other on a social level even. So we'll start seeing a lot more uptake as long as we can keep our numbers and legislation restrictions open.
And Neil, on that point around keeping it open and the support from businesses and big business and corporates to events, what would you say to an event planner that is looking at speaking to their clients on why, for instance, a CFO may say, look, our budget is minimal now that we have to spend on an online event. Why do we need to spend on a venue and catering and all these add-ons that essentially, are we going to get that return? What would you recommend for event planners to suggest or work with their clients on in terms of getting, to your point, a hybrid approach, which is part of the marketing mix?
I think one of the things you've seen is that we've obviously had this lack of social interactivity for the last 18 months. Some companies, the larger corporates, have not been back. They have not seen their people. There's been employment in the telecom sectors, in the IT sectors without teams meeting. And I think it's important to get that social interactivity going again, more from a performance-based, more from an output base as well for going forward. So an advice to any event manager is don't stop knocking on those doors. I mean, we do it all the time. I think from a flock perspective as well, we're looking at opening doors all the time. And you want to get to the point of giving the reassurance that there are venues and event companies and suppliers that take COVID very, very seriously. We understand how it works. Being in the events industry for the last 20 years, we've had to deal with different acts. We have to deal with different regulations. So we know how to adapt and how to implement all these standards and protocols. It's in our DNA. So given the ability to do it now, even with COVID, we do it with professionals that we know how to do it. So it's giving them the reassurance that any event that's going to be that will happen or take place from a COVID protocol perspective will be adhered to. From a hybrid and a technology perspective will be adhered to. But it's getting that social interactivity back and getting people out and getting people to connect and to do it. It doesn't have to be in large numbers. If you're looking at 10 to 15 people, but event planners have to keep knocking on those doors, providing the reassurance that the industry has the capability to work within these protocols.
Yeah, I agree with you, Neil. And I think adding on to that would be, as event planners do, they're always putting ideas forward to their clients and not necessarily just taking a brief and running with it, working with their clients and saying, let's plan out your event strategy for the year. What parts of that strategy are going to be online? What parts are going to be physical? How do we ensure that, with the regulations around COVID and vaccinations and all the, that's another topic on its own, but how do we essentially make sure that we can achieve your objective through two various platforms, where it is the technology platform and the physical environment? And I think there's deeper relationships and connections that happen from those physical interactions. There's small nuances and small conversations, or conversations that you may not necessarily have on an online experience. And then speaking to some event planners that have said, with travel and sustainability, reducing your carbon footprint, and time, which is a big thing. Sometimes you'll look at the event, I think to your point around what sorts of events are going to be, if they're smaller, do you have them online or physical? And then what are some of those events that you need to have them physically? So I think it's those event planners that are suggesting to their clients and involved in that planning process.
And one more thing on that, Mike, is that I think we don't understand the technology that's out there. I've been doing a lot of cold calling, and you find that a lot of people are, because, and I mean, no disrespect to Zoom or Teams, because it's available. You get to the point where people, because they're familiar with those technologies, they err on the side of using them. But when you start showing them that the engagement level of the technology that currently exists is actually phenomenal. It's peer-to-peer meetings, it's backstages, it's you take them through a demo that shows them you can do a full sponsorship, you can do exhibition side. Those platforms create a different type of engagement than the current webinar that we're doing. And you can get to 50, 200 to 1,000 people on there, and you can get a networking and a conversation going and a plenary session with breakout rooms. And the more event managers get through those spaces of getting in, getting through that first knock on the door, getting through the demo phase, showing them, I've seen people go, wow, I didn't know this existed. Oh, wow, listen, you've got a backstage. That's phenomenal, because we were trying to figure out how to speak to people and get them in line. Oh, you've got a space for sponsors and exhibitors. So get those demos done, show people what's out there, and get them to understand that from a digital perspective, from a virtual perspective, you can make events really successful.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think something that maybe we can discuss is the events usually are planned well in advance, but with online events, it seems that there's this thinking around, we can turn an event in a day or two. What has been the impact on decision making and turnaround times, would you say?
Right now, that's the biggest challenge, Mike. Whether it's a live event, whether it's a virtual event or a hybrid event, decision making is really, really hard. And I do have respect for the people who have to make these decisions, because once you start making decisions and start confirming and paying out deposits, and there's a shutdown, then you are at risk. But the turnaround time has been phenomenal. I mean, it's gone down to a day or two for massive amounts for big events. For events that are 200, 300,000 rand, you're getting a 2-day lead time, you're getting a 3-day lead time. Hybrid events are like 5-day lead times. It's really, really, really difficult. It's extremely late. I think the important thing to understand that whether it's a live event or a digital event, or a virtual event or a hybrid event, the planning processes, the setup processes are very similar. I've always said this as well within the team, is that if you're dealing with a 10 packs event and a 100 packs event, you go through the same workload, if you want to put it that way. It's difficult, Mike. I mean, you're getting short turnaround times within the week. People are, I think people need to also understand that if it's a virtual event, there's a lot of technology setup that has to happen. And, some of the teams sometimes work, straight 13, 14, 15 hours to get those setups done. So it's really, really difficult. And I think if a lot of corporates can assist us and give us a longer lead time, I think we can benefit the user experience. We can fill in the gaps that we can't when it's very late. We can add more from an engagement perspective. So yeah, it's a really, really a tough one at the moment.
I think it's around taking that approach of how you would plan a physical event as well. So you're not just saying we need something by next week or in 3 days' time. There are great platforms that you can do that, but if you really want to put a great showcase, because I think at the end of the day, online has also got a form of TV production, and not to say, I mean, physical events was the same thing, but you now have, this online component where everyone's watching a screen, and how can you best engage and make that the best production ever? And that does lead to making sure you've got enough time to put that together.
Absolutely, and you feel for corporates that are making these decisions, because it is difficult. If government changes regulations and there's an outbreak within the team of COVID, things change rapidly. Everyone's leaving it to the last minute to say, okay, everything's fine, we can go ahead. But the net effect is that from a planning, from a positioning from our side, it's so difficult. It gets difficult. But we in the industry, we know this, we live for it. I think we work hard for it. We know it's coming, and we get it done.
Definitely. Yeah, I think event planners are a really special breed. As I've said, lots of respect to event planners. And Neil, what are some of the short and long-term strategies that you feel a company can make at this point in time?
I think for me, and I'm going over because of the Tyson fight that happened lately. But for me, it's the short term is roll with the punches. I mean, you have to be completely agile. You've got to create adaptability. You've got to be in a space that you can completely navigate where you are, no matter what comes. Some things you got to do is just unpack your objectives, map out your journey or your best online experience, understand the tools that you're doing to the full extent of the digital resources, gather data, run polls, run surveys, have correct online support. In the short term, and I mentioned this earlier as well, is understand everything that you're currently doing so that when you pick up a job last minute, you are able to adapt to it, you're able to deliver it. Completely engage with your clients, understand where they're coming from, understand what they want to do. And, sometimes we want to oversell, we want to upsell, we want to create fantastic events, but sometimes the client just needs a simple event done. And I think we need to stick with that, get those events done so that we can get some energy into the industry again. Create amazing online events. There's so much of technology there. There's so much of user engagement, look and feel that you can change. Create simplicity, create events that are simple, people can engage. I think that's really from a short term. From a long term, I would say go the full 13 rounds. Find a way to figure out what is my strategy to stay in this industry as long as I can, no matter what happens. And for me, that's invest with the right partners. I think too many times, because we want to capitalize on cost, we want to bring everything internally. And sometimes that doesn't help. It doesn't help because you've got to fully understand the product. If you invest with the right partners, it helps you to keep your expenses low, bring in partners when you need them, and be strategic about who you're using. So, don't try and be all things to all people. And I've seen this a lot with a lot of companies that are trying to do various things on their own. Understand your data. You've got time now to gather the data. Understand what it's telling you, what clients want, what's working, what's not working. There are some platforms that don't work, and clients don't like it, they don't want to use it, change it, find some ways, measure, keep understanding and getting your data, but make sure that you implement the understanding of the data. A lot of us capture that data, but we don't do anything with it. So unpack it and implement it into your business. Reimagine events. Find ways that you can deliver exceptional experiences to clients. And like I said earlier, show them platforms that they don't know about, show them engagement tools, show them what you can do from an online perspective and not just a very 2D level. And be agile with budgets. I think right now, corporates will tell you straight, I don't have that kind of money. You put a budget in front of them and they're not really interested. Be agile, find ways to sit down with a client and say, how do I meet you at your price point so that you actually have events? Because we need to have events. And sometimes it's not about saying, okay, well, you can't afford the 200,000 Rand, I'm going to move on. Find a way to make it work. Because sometimes you'll see that simplifying it a little bit will help.
Yeah, I think those are some good insights. And I think to your point as well, looking at if you're extending your reach, you can also extend the reach of the event. And what I mean by that is not to a physical or online audience per se, but the number of days. You could have a strategy around a 365-day strategy to say you've got pre-recorded content. It almost comes to an online community, and this event just stays online for the duration of the year. Whether you're maybe having a weekly webinar. Some things that we're seeing with clients is you've got twice a week, you would have a webinar, and it's getting people coming in, but the platform stays live. So if they wanted to go in and get some information, they could. And you could also have like a social lounge with some of your team members. So say you're a financial institution and you want to extend the reach of your potential customers. They know that they could access this online event without physically having to book a venue all the time. And they could essentially watch any content, engage with thought leaders, with some of the staff. So to your point around thinking creatively and thinking very differently, this pandemic and the outcomes of it, if you are adaptable and agile enough, you can really increase the growth of your company and brand.
I think the one thing that you have is optimizing time. There's no travel time, there's no coffee time, there's no people standing around trying to get them into a room and then we're starting at 9:20 or 9:15. Now, even with our webinar, if you say 9 o'clock, you start at 9 o'clock. You're optimizing people's time as well. So people feel that being at home, I'm going to log on at 9 o'clock. I'm going to see this for half an hour or 35 minutes. I can get so much more done, and then I can get back at 11 and watch something else. So you have so much more that you can give, that you can fit into your day, which you couldn't before. I mean, you had an hour travel time. If you traveling from Midrand to Sandton, you've got an hour travel time. You've got to get into the vehicle. You've got to get there. You start there at 9. It's a completely different environment. So to your point, just optimize the time that you have with people, because you have so much more that you can give them. And now people at 10 o'clock at night can switch it on and watch it, where you couldn't do that before. Your events would cut off at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly. And Neil, I think, sort of ending the webinar off shortly, what would you say to the event planners and companies that are just looking at physical events, and those on the other side that are just looking at virtual events, saying that they're not going to do virtual events, they're just doing physical or waiting for physical events?
I think things have changed so dramatically, and I think where we are now, it's really important to understand that you're going to have an audience that does not want to travel, and you're going to have part of your audience that wants to come live. So it's important to understand you have to cater for both the audiences. You would have speakers that want to travel and speakers that don't want to travel. So for me, having a linear approach of only live and only virtual may hurt you in the long run because you're not adapting to what clients are currently seeing. And the second phase of that is be aware when you are designing your event that you are catering for both audiences, because sometimes we are catering only for live and we forget there's a whole online community, or we're creating only for live and we forget there's 20 people in a room. So when you're designing your event, make sure that there's tools in place that engages both platforms, both live and both virtually, and creates a seamless experience. It is really difficult. It's really difficult. People switch off the cameras, going to grab coffee, and you don't know if they're there. But if you're running a poll and you're running a survey and you're getting people to engage on their mobiles by filling questionnaires and popping surveys through their cell phones, then you're creating a bit of engagement. People feel like, oh, geez, I've got to listen. I've got to be here. I've got to be attentive. The design is very important. So honestly, hybrid's definitely here for a while, and we need to be able to invest in it, but get the right partners to do that for you, and you'll be able to see a lot of benefit in it.
Thank you so much, Neil. Any parting words before we end off to event planners and people in the industry, words of hope and encouragement?
Yeah, I think the first one is fast bait. Just hang on. I think it's we are tenacious people. We get things done when things are falling. Everybody that's done an event or an exhibition, you'll test everything on the dry run and it is absolutely perfect. At 9 o'clock when you go live and you switch that button off, there's technical issues, things are falling apart, catering's late, catering's wrong. So for me, it's really to say, hang on to where we are. You might be getting a little bit of work, or you might be getting bits and pieces of work. Stay the course, stay the 13 rounds, find partners that you can work with, give off your advice, mentor where you can, give back into the industry where you can, where you can support the industry without any financial gain. Do it to stay relevant in the industry, but be relevant, have events. There's some things, Mike, you and I both know you do at no cost because you've got to be relevant. You want to be staying in the industry. So just stay the course. We are almost there. I can almost feel like we've got a couple more months and we'll feel like everything's, you can look at Europe and you can look at the international markets opening up. The soccer games are open, no masks, football, tennis, everything's opening up. So we're almost there. So just hang on, be strong, just be who you are, be who we are in the events industry, just tenacious people.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being tenacious as well, Neil. It's been a pleasure having you on this webinar. And that's it. So you've heard it from Neil Nagooro himself. A lot of good insights, some key strategies as well, looking at, working with your clients, getting the benefits through, looking at a 365 strategy, looking at the data behind it as well, understanding the data, making more informed decisions. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us. We'll send you more information about our upcoming webinars. If there's anything that you'd like to see, topics, please feel free to leave a comment down below. And we'll be on your screens soon. So with that, thank you very much, and all the best from the Flock team. Ciao.